Now, before we understand Python, let's first try to understand an editor called VI editor. So basically, if it is Windows, you'll be using some editors like Notepad++ or Edit++ or a Notepad to open any kind of program or script and try to modify. Whereas in Linux, since you don't have a UI directly, you will be using a built-in program called VI or VIM, which is an editor using which you can edit a file and modify its contents. So pretty much when you're trying to write any kind of script, you will be using the default VI editor or a VIM editor. So let's quickly try to go through that and first get familiarized on how do you edit a file, how do you save a file, or how do you modify a file. Now, when you go to Unix or Linux, and in that, if you say VI or VIM and give a file name, then it will try to open a file name if it is already existing. If not, it will try to create a new file at that directory where you're running this. So in my current directory, you can see I have some folder and some contents. And in this, if I say test, this is a file that it is going to create. Now, since it is not there, VI editor will try to create and then we will go inside it. Now, when you go inside the editor, by default, there are two modes in which you can operate in editor. So in an VI editor, there are two modes where the first mode is called as insert mode. Basically, insert mode is the one where you will be allowed to type anything or modify anything from your file. So without going into an insert mode, you cannot modify any content in it. You can just view it. That's it. Now, the other mode, what we have is called as escape mode, where escape is a mode through which if you want to manipulate some content or pretty much if you want to run some kind of command, that is anything other than writing some content or modifying the lines or anything inside the file, then you will be using the escape mode. Okay, and by default, when you open a file in an editor, you will be in a escape mode. So in order for us to start writing something inside the file, we have to change the mode into escape mode. So for example, if you can see right now, it doesn't show anything here. And if I type something, it doesn't allow that because we are in a escape mode. So now how is that you will be changing from the default escape mode to the insert mode? So for that, you can press the I character. So if you press I, you can see it shows as a insert, which means we are in a insert mode. So now if I type anything, it gets stored. Okay, so like this, if you want to change from escape mode to insert mode, you press I. And now if you want to come out of the escape mode, then if you want to come out from an insert mode, then press escape. Okay, so if you say escape, you will be coming out of the insert mode and you can say that it is not showing. So now if you type anything, pretty much it will not allow unless and until you are in the insert mode. Okay, so if you press I, it will go into the insert mode, and if you press escape button, it will come out of the insert mode, and now you cannot type anything in it. Okay, now when you type I, by default, it will always take you to the place where your cursor is currently pointing to. For instance, now let's say my cursor is here. Okay, when you open the file, and now if you press I, the cursor will start allowing you to write from that particular location. Okay, so remember that. Now that is when you can use the arrow marks and move around in the file. Okay, so pretty much you can use the arrow to move left and right, up and down in the file. And now if you want to basically continue writing, and if you want to go to a new line, what you can do is you can press enter and it will come to the new line and you can start writing. So like this, you can continue writing as many lines that you want. And once you have written everything, if you want to save the file, you have to press :W. Okay. But if you enter the :W in the insert mode, you can see that it is actually writing it. So that is why you cannot do any action when you are in a insert mode other than putting some content in it. So you have to press escape and come out of the insert mode, and then you will be able to save the file. So now on an escape mode, if you say :W, the file will get saved. The same thing, if you want to come out of the file, then you can just say :Q, where Q represents that you are quitting this file. Okay. Now, if you say Q, it will come back. Now, if you want to go back to the file, just say VM test. Now, since there is a content, it is trying to open the file. Okay. So if you want to save the file, say :W and in the escape mode. And suppose if you want to save and quit both together, then you will say :WQ together. Okay. So first thing is you have to go to the insert mode. Now, when you say the insert mode, there are a couple of other options also in the insert mode where now let's say you want to start writing after this character, because now watch it very closely. For example, now my cursor is exactly at the last character. If I type I, now I am in insert mode, and if I type something now, it is actually not allowing me to write on the right hand side of the character, but it is allowing to write it on the left hand side because it starts from that particular location. So that is when now, how is that you are going to write from the right hand side of the character? Okay, so in that kind of scenarios, now you will not say I. Instead of I, from the escape mode, you will now press A. So if you press the alphabet A, it will be allowing you in the insert mode, but the difference is if you watch, the cursor will come to the right hand side. Okay, so now if I type something, it will come here. So that is how, if you say I, it will allow you to run in the insert mode in the same character where the cursor is there. Suppose if you want to start writing on the right hand side, then if you press A, it will change into the insert mode, as well as it will allow you to start writing from the right hand side of that. Okay, so that is another option of going into the insert mode from the escape mode. Now, there is one more way of going into the insert mode, that is using the letter or the alphabet called O. Now, if you press O from an existing line, it will create a new line beneath the current line and then go to the insert mode, so that now if you want to write anything below this in a new line, you can press O. So you can see from the escape mode, if I press O, it will create a new line and it will put the insert mode in that, so that I can write something from here. So if I press escape, it will come out. Once again, if I say O, from wherever you are saying O, it will create a new line beneath it and it will put into the insert mode. Okay. Same way, if you say capital O, then it will be the reverse of this. Instead of creating a line beneath it and going into the insert mode, capital O will put a line above it and go into the insert mode. Okay, so that's the difference between small o and capital O. Okay, so now we saw how do we move to insert mode either using I or A or O. Now, along with it, sometimes you might have to edit a file, and while editing a line, you might have to traverse between the line. So let's say you are at this location, and now you want to add something at the end of the line. Now, in the escape mode, if you press dollar, it will always take you to the end of the line. So in Linux, generally within a file, dollar represents the end of the line and zero represents the beginning of the line. So you can see, if I go to any line, if I say dollar, it will take me to the last or the end of the line. And if I say zero, it will take me to the beginning of the line. Okay, so like this, you can move around between a file. And remember, in an insert mode, I cannot do, because if I am in the insert mode and if I say dollar, it is going to put that dollar inside it. So only on a escape mode, these commands will be running. So if I say dollar, it will take you to the end, or zero to the beginning. Okay, that is for moving on the beginning of the line or end of the line. Suppose you want to actually delete some content. Let's say you did some mistake and you want to delete a character. So if you want to delete a character, you will use X. Okay, so X represents you are deleting a character. So now if I type X, you can see that I am deleting a character. So every time you press X at that location where the cursor is pointing, it will be deleting a character. Okay, so now if you want to delete a couple of characters, then you can use a combination of numbers with characters. So to just quickly see, so we have escape mode and the insert mode. So to go to the escape mode, pretty much press the escape key. And for an insert mode, you will say I. Okay, so that will take you to the insert mode by default. Now, if you say A, it will also change to insert mode, but allows to write from the right hand side. Okay, so the same thing, if you say O, creates a line beneath existing line and allows in insert mode. The same thing if you say capital O, it will create a line above the existing line and it will allow. And then a dollar represents end of the line and a zero represents beginning of the line. And if you want to delete, you will use a character X. So deletes a character. Now, the same thing, suppose, let's say you want to delete 4 characters. Rather than pressing X 4 times, you can say NX. Then N represents the number of characters you want to delete. So it will delete N. So now, let's say if I say 4X, you can see it is deleting 4X. If I want to delete these two, if I say 2X, it will delete 2 characters. Okay, so like that, you can delete as many characters as you want in that current line using the number. Same way, if you want to delete a word, then you will use DW. So let's say I want to delete this word, I'll say DW. Okay, same way. Now, if I want to delete more than one word, then the same concept of NDW. So if I say 2DW, it will delete 2 words. Okay. Same thing. Now, if you want to delete a line itself, then you will say dd. So let's say I want to delete this empty line. I'll say dd. Same thing. If you want to delete multiple lines, then you give a number and give the dd. Now let's say if I want to delete 2 lines from the current cursor, if I say 2dd, it will delete 2 lines. Okay. Now we saw how do we delete. Let's say if you want to copy a file rather than deleting. So for copying, you will use YY. So YY represents yonking. So it copies a line. Okay. And for pasting, you will say P. And what it will do, paste the copied line beneath the existing line. Now let's see that. So here I want to do a copy of this. So if I say, okay, before copying, let me try to put something into it. Okay, so let's say I copy this line. So if I say YY, it will get copied. Now the same thing, let me put the cursor here, and if I say paste, beneath the second line, it will copy. So from wherever you are saying the paste, it will paste the line beneath the existing line. Okay. In the same format, if you want to copy multiple lines, then you can use N and YY. So let's say I want to copy these 2 lines. So now if I say 2YY, at this location, it will copy 2 lines. And let me come here and say paste. You can see it will be pasting 2 lines that you have copied. Okay, so that's how you can copy one or many lines and pretty much you can paste it. Okay, so that's what you will be doing for pasting. And finally, once again, if I want to come out of this file by saving, you will say colon W for saving. And if you want to come out of it, then you will say colon WQ or just Q, that will come out. Okay, getting it? At least the fundamentals on how do you change a file and how is that pretty much you will be modifying the contents in it.
Yeah, Adam. I think I already saw this in your Linux fundamentals video.
Oh, is
I
it?
don't remember, but I studied about this.
Okay. No problem. So then let's jump on to Python without wasting a time. Now, what exactly is Python? So Python is actually a open source object oriented scripting language, just like how we have Perl or shell scripting. This is also a scripting language, but it is kind of much more powerful than shell or Perl. And it also has the object oriented way of writing a program or a script. Okay. And now Python is completely portable and we can use the Python to run against any Linux machines or Windows machines or even Mac. So regardless of what machine it is there, Python will be running on all of them. Okay. And in that, the major important thing that we need to understand is when you say a programming language, usually when you write a program and when you want to execute, first thing that you have to do is you have to compile the program. For example, if you recall the build management steps where if you write a Java file, what is the first step that we have to do? We have to compile it and convert a object file related to that code, which the machine can understand. And then we will be running that object file. Like for Java, it was a class file that you get as an output after compiling. Okay. So in the same way, now Python doesn't need it because Python doesn't use any compilation. Internally, Python uses something called as a interpreter. So what does this interpreter do? So the interpreter will process the Python at the runtime, and it will be trying to execute whatever the code that you have inside the Python program line by line, rather than compiling it and then creating an object file and then running it. Using the interpreter, Python will be directly running the contents inside your script or program line by line. Okay, so it is also called as a interpreting language, wherein it doesn't do the compilation. So remember that. So unlike Java, C, C++, you don't have to do any compilation. You just write some code and ask Python to run, and it will be executing one by one. Then Python is also going to work on an interactive mode. So when I say interactive mode, either you can write some code into a file and ask the Python to execute it. If not, it can also give us a command prompt specific for Python where you can interactively give some command and directly execute it rather than writing a program. Okay, so that is also available in case if you have some testing to be done with some small one line or two lines. You don't have to literally write a program. Simply get into the interactive command prompt of Python and start running the commands manually and test it. Okay, and as I was saying, the major advantage of going towards Python, Python supports the object-oriented way of writing your program. So that is when whatever the OOPS concept that we are going to work on the C++ or Java, the same features will also be available in Python that we can make use of, such as classes, the concept of inheritance or overloading, or the objects, classifying your program into objects. All those things can also be done in Python if needed. If not, you can use it as a simple scripting language also. And then Python supports a lot of libraries which are built in. So if you have a specific task to be done, you don't have to keep writing all the code for that. Instead, you can make use of some pre-built libraries which will be available in Python. Now that will be specific to, let's say you want to connect to database and do something. Rather than typing in everything, you can make use of these libraries through which you will be able to run some predefined commands and get the output. So like this, you have lots and lots of libraries for different kind of activities that you want to do, so that the task or whatever work that we are going to do will be simplified. So that is the major advantage on why you will be going towards Python. Okay. So now you can pretty much install Python by going to this, wherein you have installer specific to the Windows operating system, or pretty much if it is on Linux, like how we use on CentOS, you can just say the packaging name as Python itself. So if you just say yum install Python, for example, on CentOS, it will install Python. If the same thing you want to install on Ubuntu, you can just say apt-get install Python, and it will be installing it on your Ubuntu. Okay, if it is on a Windows, you can download the exe or the executable from this location and run it on your Windows box. So once you have installed Python, now Python doesn't have a UI as such. So everything that you're going to invoke will be from the command line. So we know that if there is a executable or a binary file which we want to call from the command line, then you need to add the directory where it is available to the path variable. So what is a path environment variable? Whenever in any operating system, if you want to call a program or an binary, by default, it will search for all the directories that you have given in the path environment variable, and only if that binary or the file that you're trying to run exists in the directory that you have given in the path environment variable, then the file will be able to, the operating system will be able to run it directly. So that is how when you install Python, by default, it will be available in the user local bin or in some other place. So what you have to do is make sure it is put in the path variable on the directory where you have installed Python. So to cross check where you have installed Python, you can use a command called which Python, and it will give you the location. So it says now you have installed Python in this location. So what you have to do is you have to go to the path environment variable and make sure you give this particular path, that is the user bin in which it is available, inside your path environment variable. Okay, so based on your operating system, if it is a Linux based and you are using the bash shell in Linux, just run this command so that along with the existing value, it will be taking it up. Now, you should be doing this. You should be giving only the path where it is available. Okay, now in case if Python is installed on some other directory, then change this directory to whatever directory where you have Python, which you get the output from the which Python command. Similarly, if you are trying to run Python on Windows, then make sure go to your system, that is right click on a system or my PC, and go to advanced system properties, and in that you will find the environment variable. So in that, you try to add a new environment variable or edit the existing path environment variable and append this value, so that wherever that you have installed the Python, it will be trying to consider it. So going forward, now if you run Python or invoke Python, it will be able to recognize. So now you see the operating system is able to recognize this command because this command is available in this directory and this is added as part of your path environment variable. Okay, so this is the first thing that you have to do, so that from wherever you want to call the Python in this operating machine, it will be, or the operating system, it will be trying to invoke the Python. Okay, so that's the first thing. Now, unlike other scripting or programming languages, Python also has certain set of syntaxes using which we will be defining the code or the statement inside a Python script. Okay, so in that, let us first understand what and all are the syntax that is mandatory for us to use or write in a Python script or a program. So pretty much there is no difference between a Python script or I call it as a Python program. Now, when you are using Python to just do a procedural way of calling it without the oops concept, then you can call it as a script. But as soon as you put the concept of object oriented or oops into your Python and you are trying to run something, then you no more call it as a script. You have to call it as a program. Again, there is no hard-coded rule, but pretty much it gives more meaningful message that a program is used to do much more complex task than the script. Okay, so that way, any line that you actually write in the Python script or a program will be basically ended or terminated by a new line character, which means now you don't have to give a semicolon or any other character at the end of the line like Perl or other scripting language. So in Python, if you have written one line and you want to tell that this is the end of the line or its content, then you will have to give a new line character. Pretty much a new line character will be obtained when you press enter in it. Okay, so make sure now you don't give any special characters at the end. So by putting a new line character at the end, it will be considered as one line. So let's say now you want to write some line. Okay, so if you say I'm writing some line like this, and if you enter, automatically there will be a new line character, because of which it completes one line of statement that you have defined. Like this, you can give as many lines that you want, and to represent that you have completed the line, you will be giving a new line character, or pretty much if you press enter, it will be considered as the end of the line. Okay. Then, since you're going to write many lines of code inside your Python script, sometimes it will not be easy for us to just go through it and read it. That is when it is quite useful that you should be giving some comments wherever it is necessary that will describe what that line is going to do. So if you put a hash in any line, and anything after that will be considered as a comment, and the Python will not run anything on it. Now, for example, I can first put a comment in the first character, and if I type something, this is not even going to consider this. The same way, I can put a comment here also. Now, here, if I press enter, what it is going to do, the line is from here to here, whereas the comment has begin from this. So it will actually try to execute the line from here to here. And after the comment, it is not going to run anything because it is going to consider it as a comment beyond it. So until the end of the line, it will consider as a comment. And only before it, from beginning of the line to this place, it is going to consider that you have written something and you have to do for that. Okay, so based on this, wherever you give a comment, it will not be, wherever you give a hash, it will be treating it as a comment, and it is only for reading purpose and not to execute. Okay, then now when you're writing a Python script or a code, you might have to write some lengthier line of code which is going to do some complex thing. Now, if sometime you're writing a lengthier line of code, it will not be easy for us to understand. Let's say that you're typing something on an editor from here to here, and beyond this, the characters are going. So that case, now you always have to scroll and look. So instead of putting the lengthier line of contents in the same line, you can break up that line into multiple lines. So when you want to break up a line into multiple lines, then you will use a backslash character where it will not be considering both of them as two lines, but the line followed by this backslash character will be considered as a continuation of this. Okay, so for example, now let's say if I want to break this into two lines, whereas when it is going to execute, it is still considered as one line, but while viewing, we will be seeing it as two lines. So to do that, if I simply say a backslash and enter, now when actually Python is trying to run this, it will try to understand that this is not two line, but this is just a continuation of your line here, and both of them is considered as one single line. So like this, you can split a given line into multiple lines by giving slashes. Okay. Now, same way, suppose for some purpose, the line, whatever that you have, is very small. Okay, and unnecessarily you don't want to pretty much put many lines like this for a simple statement or a code that you have given. So if you want to combine two separate lines and put it into one line, then you have to clearly separate those two lines using the what? Semicolon. So now, for example, these two lines are very simple. So if I want to combine that, then simply I will consider by putting it up as a colon, and then now when Python sees this, it will not consider it as one line because there is a separator called semicolon. So it will first execute this line and then it will come here and execute this line. Okay, so that is how sometimes when you're writing some complex code where you have small things to be done, you will group them together and put it into one line for viewing it. But Python is still going to execute it line by line only. Okay, so that is how you can add the second line content into the same line. Okay, and when you're actually writing the Python code, you will be writing many lines, and each line is generally called as a statement. Okay, and when you're trying to write multiple lines of code, you will have to do certain indentation wherever is needed. Now, indentation is nothing but, let's say you are trying to do some task, and for that task, you have some substatement to be executed. So in that way, when you want to do certain subtask or a substatement for an existing task, then you have to properly indent it, and only by indentation you will clearly know that that block of statement or that line of code is specifically used to do something. Okay, if not, if you write everything in the same indentation, then that means that the Python is going to execute one after the other and it represents one single program, whereas within the program you can do a sub level of indentation using which Python will understand that these are substatement given for a existing one. So we will use this pretty much going forward when we are trying to use different scenarios. And remember, when you're trying to do indentation, you have to use only white spaces. Okay, so when I say white spaces, these are nothing but the spaces using your space bar, you will be getting it. Okay, now let's say for example you are doing some condition, and for that condition you want to execute something. Okay, now in that kind of cases, this is a different block of statement along with this condition. So that way, now when you're writing your program specifically for this set of code or the blocks of statement, what you will do is you will just give some indentation, and there is no specific indentation limit saying that you have to give only one space or two space or three spaces. Depending on your interest, you can give at least two or three or even more, but you have to follow the same indentation for all the block of code, I mean for all the code within the same block, so that it gives you a more meaningful way of identifying it. Okay, so you don't have any fixed number of indentation, but all the lines that will be put as part of one block of statement, one block is nothing but one group of statement, has to be indented in the same way. Okay, so that is how when you go through program you can easily see that the lines will be actually shifting and coming back forward, which means that you are grouping the lines of code into a block and you are trying to specifically execute them on a particular condition or a particular scenario through which it will be easy for us to understand. Okay,
Okay, Adam.
then now if you are trying to write some string, okay, so basically a string is nothing but a value that can combine some characters or some numbers or combination of both of them together. So anytime if you are trying to define a string value, then you can use a single quote or a double quote or a triple quote. Both of them or all of them gives the same meaning, but make sure if you are defining a string to store some value, then whatever the quote that you are using, you have to close it or end it with the same quote. So you cannot say that, okay, I'm defining a string like this. Okay, now I am defining a string with a double quote and I can end with a single quote. No. So if you open with double quote, close it with double quote. If you open it with single quote, then make sure to end it with single quote. So that is how anything that you open, you have to close the string with the same quote. Okay, whereas Python supports all the three, that is single quote, double quote, and the triple quote. Okay, clear with the basic syntax that is needed for Python?
Yes, Adam.
Okay, now how do you differentiate a Python file from a rest of the file? So that is when you're writing a script or a program, you have to put the name of the file ending up with a .py, which represents that it is a Python file. Okay, so any file that you're trying to write, pretty much end the file with a .py. So that represents that it is a Python file, and also we can quickly identify it. Okay, so that is the main reason why you will be always saving a file with the extension called .py. You can give any name, but end it with .py. Okay. Now, when you're trying to write a Python program, now let's focus on the very first line that you're going to write. So the very first line that you're going to put in your Python program will be something like this, where you will first put a hash and then a exclamatory mark followed by which Python that you're using. So when you run the which command, you will be getting a Python, right, which specifies the location. So you will be specifying this as your first line. So make it as a habit to give this as the first line inside your Python program. Now, why exactly is it required? So I'll talk about it a little later. But now, remember, you have to give the Python, that is the hash comment, as the first line, which is called as a directive or a derivative in a Python. So this should be the very first line. Now, let's try to write a simple Python program. And in that, I will just use a command or a syntax or a function called print, where print will actually try to print whatever that you give inside the double quotes on this statement on your console. Okay, so let's take a simple example and see how it is going to run. So now what I'm going to do, in my current directory, I'll create a folder called Python, and I'll go inside it so that I'll store all the Python scripts here. And in this, let me open a file called python.test.py, where since I'm saving it with .py, it represents that it is a Python script. And in that, now I'll go into the insert mode by pressing I, and the first line that I'll put it, the user bin Python. Okay, and now the next line I'll just put is print. This is our first Python script. Okay, that's it. And now, as we know, in Python, to end a line, you don't have to give any special characters other than giving a new line character. Okay, so pretty much I'll give a new line character and end the line, and let me save it. Okay, so let's open one more session which I have in this. Let me go to the same Python folder. You can say you have this. Now, how is that you are going to call a Python program or a script? So to call a Python script or a program, you will basically say Python and then pass the name of the file to it. This is one way of calling it. So now to call this, I'll simply say Python and the name of the file. Okay, so now you can see it directly executed line by line. In that, the very first line that we have given, or there is only one line which says print. So what print is going to do? Print is a statement which will take whatever value that you have given within the quotes or passed as a value for this and put it on the console so that you can see that as an output coming onto your screen. Okay, so this is one way of executing. The other way of executing, or before that, what exactly you are doing here is basically when you run this command, it means that you are calling this. What is this? So okay, this is a Python 2. Oh my goodness. Okay, this is a executable. So basically Python is a executable, right? Now, when you invoke this, you are actually calling a executable, and in that you are passing the content of a file which will get executed line by line. That is what is exactly happening. Now, instead of calling this Python executable, if you want to directly call this file, then how will the operating system know that whatever the lines of code that you have put inside it is going to be Python based? Remember, by giving an extension in Linux, it doesn't exactly know whether it is a shell script or it is a Python script. It doesn't matter with the extension. But for the operating system, when you invoke Python, that 100% knows that this is a Python executable. So anything that you call after this will be the content will be on the syntax of Python that will invoke. But if you want to invoke it directly, then the other way of doing it is directly you just say dot slash and the name of the file. Okay. So now if you do, it will not be able to execute because it will not be having a execute permission. So if you want to execute a file directly, then make sure you have a execute permission for that. And for that, you will say chmod plus x and the file name. And you will have the execute mode. Okay. So now if you try to run the same thing, it will execute. But still, the question that I asked still remains unanswered because when you executed this, it is just a file. Now, let me type this command and show you. Now, you can see this is basically a normal file. So how did the operating system know exactly that it has to execute it using Python? That is because inside your file, you have given the very first line. So the purpose of this line is to tell to the operating system that if you haven't told on which executable that you want to use to run all the commands or the statements inside it, then take this as the executable using which you will be running all those things. So when you invoke this, internally, this is nothing but this executable. So directly, whatever the content you have, it is going to run using this. Whereas when you're invoking the file directly, it doesn't know what executable to use. So that is why you will give the first line where this represents that the shebang tells to the operating system that, hey, look, this is actually a Python program where you use this executable and run all the rest of the lines that you see in this file. Okay, so that's the other way of writing, and that is the importance of giving this as the first line. Getting it?
Yes, Adam.
Okay. Now, when you're basically writing any kind of script or program, in fact, on Python, now you will be required to store some value and reuse some value because you are trying to do some automation. So that way, now in Python, there are some things called as variable, where a variable is nothing but a reserved memory that will store some particular value when you're running some Python program. Okay, so until the Python program is running, what you can do is you can create something called as a variable and you can store some value inside it. And when the Python is running, Python will try to allocate some memory on your operating system and store the value of that variable until the Python program is running. After it is running, I mean, if it has completed, the value will not be available. But when you're running the program, it will be trying to store that value into a variable and a memory will be allocated. Okay, so that is how you can define many variables using which you can store different kind of values in it and you can reuse it whenever you want. So that is the main purpose of using a variable, that is to store some value and reuse it whenever you want within the program. Okay, now when you're trying to define a variable and use it, make sure first you tell to the Python that there is a variable that you have by defining it and then use it. Because without creating a variable or defining a variable, if you directly try to use, then Python will not be knowing that whether it is a variable available in your program or not. So make sure first you assign some value to that variable and then try to use that variable so that wherever you are referring to the variable later, it will be giving you the value that is stored inside it. Okay, and the naming convention for creating a variable is you can use a combination of alphabets and the characters, and in that you should always begin with either a small case of a to b, I mean a to z, or on the capitals. Sometimes you can also create a name of a variable beginning with underscore. Okay. And now, when you say you are going to create a variable, how is that you are going to store a variable or create a variable? So that is when you will be trying to use the equal sign and put a value to a variable, where on the right hand side you will be giving the value, and on the left hand side of the equals you will be putting the variable name. Suppose, let's say I want to create a variable called my name, and I want to store Adam in it. Then what I'll do is simply, if I create a variable where I'll say my name and equal to some value, then the left hand side of your equal to is the name of the variable, and the right hand side, whatever you have of the equal, represents the value that you're going to store in it. Okay. And going forward, anywhere in the program after this line, if I just say my name, it is going to give the value that you have stored in it. So that is how you can reuse this value or recall the value whenever you want. Okay. Now, when you say a variable, you can pretty much store a string or a number or a combination of both these things in a variable. So there is no restriction saying that you should store only a string. Okay, you can do a combination of both also. So now in pretty much Python, there are 5 standard data types. Okay, so what do you mean by a data type? A data type is nothing but a variable in which you will be storing a specific type of data. So that is when, if you are trying to store a numeric value into a variable, then it will be called as numbers. In the same way, if you are trying to store a string value, that is some alphabets, into a particular variable, it will be called as a string type. Okay, so like this, based on what you're going to store in it, you will be having different types of variables. Okay, so one of them, what we have is the numbers, where a number is a type of variable where you will be storing only the numbers into it. And once again, there is no classification, unlike other programming languages, that you have to define that this is a variable which is going to be used for storing a number or a string. At any point of time, you can store any value in it. It doesn't going to say that you have to first define that this variable is used only for storing number or only for string, or if you're trying to replace, that is also possible. Okay, so there is no hard-coded way of saying it, but it is based on what data you store. Automatically Python will understand that that is a number type of data or string, and based on that it will try to handle it. So that way, now when you create a variable and if you want to reuse it, then as I said, wherever you refer the name of the variable, it will be trying to give you the content that you have stored in it. Okay, now let's try to write a simple program, and in that we will try to put some value and print the value of it. Okay, so now to this existing program, I'll add this line. So what we are doing now is we are trying to create two variables where the left hand side, whatever you have of the equal, is the name of the variable, and on the right hand side, whatever you have is the value. So we have created two variables of the type number, where the variable 1 has a value 10 and the variable 2 has the value 20. And now if you just say print and this, what will happen? It will try to print only the string whatever you have given from here to here. But along with it, if you want to print the value that you have stored in it, then wherever you see, if you just say or call only the variable name, it will be replacing the value of what you have stored. So the output of this will be value of variable 1 is colon and whatever that you have stored. So that is 10. So it will say value of variable 1 is 10, value of variable 2 is 20. So it is going to give us the output in this. So this is how you can append the print output value along with the stored value. Okay. Now let me try to run this. So if I just say Python and the file name, you can see that it is giving us the value here. Okay. So now you can see, so you can make use of a variable by first defining it and then you can use it. So if I don't define a variable and I'm trying to use, then it will give an error. For example, let me remove this. Okay. And if you try to run, you can see that it is saying that you are trying to use a variable called var1, but it is not defined. Okay, so that's how before using a variable, make sure you define it and then use the value. Okay, so wherever you are defining a variable, it will take the value, and going forward anywhere in the program, if you use this variable name, it will be just replacing this place with the value of what it is stored in it. Okay. Now, that is when you store a number. Now, what is that you're going to do if you want to store a string? So the only difference is rather than storing some number, you will be storing some string wherein it is a combination of several alphabets. And now, if you are trying to store a string, sometimes you might be using some space, because if you're trying to store a line, you might have certain words in it, right? So in that case, now you cannot just directly give it like how you give a number. So what you have to do is you have to put it within a quotes. Only then it represents that you are trying to store the complete value. That is, now if you're trying to store some value here, let's say you are creating a variable now, and for this, if you want to store a string like this, now it won't take like this because you have a space, then it has a different meaning. So that is when you have to enclose it in a single quotes or a double quotes, where now it means whatever value that you have on the right hand side will be stored inside the variable on the left hand side. Okay, so that is what you will be doing it. And then now, just like how you call the variable, wherever within the program, if you just call this particular variable, it will be replacing that variable with the particular value that you have put in it. Okay, now let's try to do the same thing in this. So here, what I'll do is, now I'll say there is a variable 3, and for this I'll say hello Adam. And now to print it, if I just say var3, see what happens. You can see it replaces that with the content of the variable and it is printing it. So that's how you first define it with some value, and wherever you want to use, you use. Whereas in this, I'm just trying to print it just to show. Whereas in the actual program, when you're doing some complicated task, you will be using this value and trying to do some other task. Okay. Now, it is also possible that from a particular string, it is not just that you always have to refer a string completely. If needed, you can basically slice the string and take only a particular character from that. So in order to do it, you will be using a square bracket, and if you give a number which corresponds to the character indexing, okay, where on a string, whatever you have given, the indexing starts from 0. So now if you say the variable square bracket 0, then it will give you the first character that is available in the string, that is h. Suppose if you say the variable name square bracket and 1, it will give you the second character. So like that, you can use the character indexing to pick up a particular character from a string where the indexing begins with 0 and it goes on in the incremental way. Same way, if you want to access in the reverse, let's say you want to access the last character, but you don't know how many strings or characters are available in the string, then you can use -1, where -1 represents the last character and 0 represents the first character. Same way, if I say -2, it will be giving me the last second character from the end. Okay, so like that you can use it. The same way, now if you want to have a range of characters to be printed in this, let's say I want to print the first, second, and third character, then I will say a difference using colon. So here, if I say the variable name square bracket 0:2, then it will be giving me the range of characters that is available in that variable or string. Okay, now let's try that also. Let's try to put one more string here, wherein this is just a variable. Okay, now so let's try to run this. So you can see now that now when you say print str, this is the name of the variable, it is going to replace it completely, that is hello world. And then if you say str of first index, then it will give you the first character in it. If you say 2:5, then what is the index 2? That is 0, 1, 2. It is 2. And the fifth character is 2, 3, 4, 5. So it is going to give a range from the second to fifth characters available. Okay, the same way, if you just say 2 colon and nothing, then from the second character or the index, it is going to give you completely until the end. So that is how you can slice a particular string and particularly use only a selected character in it. Okay, and if needed, what we can do is we can also use certain operations like star and plus, where it will try to print the string based on the number of times. That is, you are multiplying it. So if you say the variable star2, that means this is a string. So a string is going to be printed 2 times. Okay, so let's try doing it. So to this, if I just say, and if you run the program, you can see that it is just trying to print it 2 times. Now, for the same string, if you want to concat a value, that is, you want to append a value to the existing string and you want to print, then you will say plus. Okay, so now if I say plus and pretty much give this value to whatever the content of the variable that is a string, it will append test and it will print it. You can see it is appending. So like that, you can try to manipulate the values that you store it into a variable of the type string, which will be having this string characters in it, and you can use it or replace particularly with some content and manipulate to give or get only that particular or selected content. Okay. Getting it?
Yes, Adam.
Okay. Now, if you look, while using a number or a string type of variable, you are going to store only one value. But in actual production, there will be scenarios where you have to store multiple values. Now, for example, if you are trying to create a variable to store all the details about a user. So for a user or an employee, you will be having the details like first name, last name, what is his designation, what is his employee ID, where does he reside, his contact number, all those things will be there, for example. So that way, now we are not supposed to create different variables to store different kind of values. So that is when we will be using a special type of variable called list, where list type of variable will be used to store multiple elements. Okay, now that multiple elements then you are going to store will be basically separated by comma. Okay, and while defining it, unlike how we were defining it for a number or for a string, you have to put it in a square bracket and separate all the elements using comma. And now each item or the element that you are going to store in this variable type can be either a number or it can be a string. So it is not mandatory that everything should be of the same type. So you can store both or only one type, or a combination of both is also possible. So basically list is nothing but a combination of several types of number or string variable, where it will be separated by comma. Okay, now you are going to store it. Okay, but how is that you are going to retrieve? Because until now, if it was a single number or a string, I can easily say that variable name and the Python is to replace the value of it, right? For example, here, if I just say str, it is going to replace of it completely. Or the same way, if I just say var1 or var2, it is going to replace it with 10 and 20. But now, when you have more than one value in the list, how exactly you are going to get a value? So once again, the Python will use something called as indexing to identify each element. Okay, where what is that indexing? Indexing is nothing but a number which you will use to identify each of the element. And the indexing once again begins with 0 and it goes on in an incremental way. So the very first element or the item that you have stored in your list type of variable will be recognized by the index number 0, and the next one with index number 1, and then with index number 2, 3, and it goes on. The same way, if you want to identify from the reverse, then -1 will be used to represent the last element or the item. Okay. So now, how is that you're going to retrieve a value from this? So to store a value or to create a list variable, you will say the name of the variable on the left hand side equal to, in the square bracket, comma separated by the list of values that you want to keep. And now to access a particular element, what you will say is, you will say the name of the variable, that is the name of the list, and in the square bracket you will be giving the index number. So now, rather than giving the complete value, it will be giving you only the specific element or the item based on the index. Okay, now let's try to see that. For example, here, now let me remove all those things so that it's easy for us. So I'm just creating a variable called list, which is of the type list. Okay, just to make sure that we understand that this is of the type list, I have given the same name. Other than that, you can give any name to this. There is no restriction. So here now, if you run this, you can see if you just say print list, it is going to replace this variable with the complete content. So you can see that it is printing the complete content. But instead of getting the complete content, if you want to use only the first element or the item, then you will have to say list, and in the square bracket the index number of that. So the first element will be referred by 0. Okay, so now if you say print list and in the square bracket 0, you can see it is printing you only the first element. In the same way, if you say list of 1, then it is going to give you the corresponding index numbers value. Okay, and if I say print list of -1, then it is going to give me the last element in it. Getting it on how do you define a list and how do you retrieve a value from a list?
Yes, Adam.
Now, the list also works in the same way as a string or a number. The only difference is rather than storing one number, you are storing many numbers or many values. Let's say if you want to concatenate or add values to the list, then simply if you say plus or in the star mark, that will also try to work in the same single variable type. Okay, so if you see the output of this, so you can see that it is going to first, now when you say run or print it 2 times, it is printing the second list. This is one type of list and this is second type of list. Okay, so the name of this variable or list is tiny list. So here if you say *2, it is going to print it 2 times. The same way, now if I say this variable plus this variable, whatever is the content of this variable, that is from here to here, plus it is going to take the values of this variable, that is this two, and totally it is going to print together. So that's how you can combine two particular data types, that is two list, and print it together. Okay,
Yes, Adam.
okay. Then the last type of variable, which is again an important type of variable, is dictionary. Now what exactly is dictionary? Now just like list, dictionary is also going to store multiple values. Okay, but the difference is the list is going to store the values in an order. Okay, to explain the order, anytime if I say list of 0, it is always going to give me this value itself, whereas in the dictionary, whatever values that I store will not be stored in the same order. Maybe while we are storing it, we will give an order, but when the Python runs and it stores it into the memory, it will be storing it in a random fashion. Okay, so it is simply an unordered collection of values. And when you are going to represent a dictionary, you will be representing using flower bracket. So remember, a list will be defined using square bracket and a dictionary will be defined using flower bracket. Once again, what is the major purpose of using dictionary? Because you already have list to store multiple values. Now, this dictionary is a special type of variable where you are not going to store all the values like how we have stored in the list. So instead of storing the values directly, it will be actually storing a key and a value pair. Okay, so now sometimes rather than directly storing the value, if you want to identify a value in terms of a key, then you will be using this dictionary. So simply when you're trying to store a value in dictionary, you will not be storing it as a single or a comma separated, but it is going to be as a combination of a key and a value pair together. Okay, and whenever now if you want to take the value from the particular dictionary variable, you will refer to the key, and with the reference of the key you will be trying to take the value correspondingly that is stored inside it. Okay, so remember, dictionary means you will not be storing everything directly, but the value will be in a format of key and a value pair. So how you define? You can see example here. Now we are going to define a dictionary using the flower bracket, and in that this is the first element and this is the second element and this is the third element, where if you see this one element is having a key and a pair value together, where whatever you see before the colon is the key name and the value that is going to be stored in it is the one after the colon, that is right hand side. Same way, this is the key name and this is its corresponding value. This is its key name and this is its corresponding value. Okay, so this is used pretty much for storing some complex data, and to access them dictionaries will be very useful. Okay, now when you are trying to store the values in this format, the name of the key that you're going to use should always be unique, which means you cannot have one more item. For that also, you cannot have the name of the key as department or code or name, because if you once again create another item which will have a existing key name, then it will overwrite the value. So all the keys that you're going to have should be unique. Okay, and now if you want to actually refer to the value, then you will not be referring to the value directly, but you will be referring to the name of the key, and corresponding to it, it will give me the value. So now if I want to take the value of this key called name, then I will say give me the value in this variable of the key name, so that it will be giving me John. Same way, if I say give me the value stored in the key called code of this variable, that is dictionary, then it will give me this. Okay, so that is how you're going to retrieve. So how exactly you're going to retrieve? So to retrieve, once again, just like list, you will be using a square bracket. Okay, where if you say the name of the variable, that is the dictionary, and in the square bracket, if you try to give the name of the key, it will be returning the value that you have stored. So to put it up in a better way, now let's say you are storing a variable, okay, of the type dictionary, and to that you will use the flower bracket. So the first thing that I will say is key1 colon value1, and then key2 colon value2. Okay, now if I want to access or get the value of the first key, then I will say the name of the variable, that is the dictionary, and in the square bracket, what you will do, you will give the key there. Okay, so the key is key1. So if I say like this, it will be returning me the value of 1 that is corresponding to this. Same way, if I say in the square bracket the key value, then it will be returning me this. So it is exactly like how you were pointing to the index in your list. Since here there is no index concept because you are storing it in terms of a key and a value pair, you will use the name of the key to give. That is why we should be having the name of the key as unique one. You cannot have it as a generic one or duplicating it. Okay, so this way you will be retrieving the value. Okay, now let's try to see an example. Now let me put it up here. So in this, how many keys do we have? We have one key separated by comma, second key, key pair value, third key. And in this, what and all are the keys? Name, code, and department. Okay. And now, if you want to take a specific value, then if you just say print first, see what happens here. Okay. Now, if I just print this, let's see what and all values that it will be printing. So you can see it is going to print you what? Everything, but note it down. It is not printing it in the same order how you have stored. That is why I said in dictionary, it is a unordered way of storing everything. And now from this, if you want to get only the value of the key called name, then if you say in the square bracket, the name of the key, what is it? Name is not defined. Okay, so you can see now it is giving me or returning the value specifically to that key. The same way, if you try to get the key of code and you can see it is going to give you the value of that. Okay, so that is how you can specifically get a value of a key by giving it in this way in the square bracket. Okay, now that is taking the value. What if you want to add a new key? So if you want to add a new key, then it is the same way where what you will do is you will simply give the name of the variable and the new key name. Okay, so and then equal to its value. So what it will do, it will try to store it like this. Pretty much after this, it is going to store it in this fashion. And it is not sure that it is going to store it exactly at the end. It can store it anywhere. So that is how you can pretty much add a new value to the variable, that is the dictionary variable. Okay, so let's try to add that. Now what I'll do is I'll say tiny dict, that is the dictionary name, and to that let us add a new value where we have the name, his employee code, and the department, and I'll say his phone number. Okay, and the value of his phone number would be pretty much something like this. Okay, and now if I print this once again, okay, so now if you see the value of the dictionary, you will be having 4 keys. You can see now, in addition, we have also added a new key. So that is how you can insert a new key and a value at any point of time where it is not an ordered way. We don't know where it is storing. That is why in order to get this value, we always have to refer to the key name. Only with that, we will be able to get the value from it. Okay. And now let's say when you're writing a program, it's not easy for us to remember the key names. So that is when at any point of time, if you want to get all the key names or the key that we are having in that dictionary or the variable, then if you just say the variable name dot keys, that is only for the dictionary. Okay, then it will try to give us all the key names that we have. Okay, now let's try this. So to this, if I run, you can see we have 4 keys. So it is printing up. The same thing if I run it before this. Okay, let me delete all these things. So before adding it, if I put the same thing, you can see the output what you get here. So now if you can look here, the keys what you have is only 3. And then after adding it, you can see the keys is 4. So that's how at any point of time, it is going to give you the number of keys that is stored and what and all are its value that it will be showing, not the value, but the name of the keys it will be displaying. Same way, if you want to display all the values directly, then you will say the variable name dot values and in the parenthesis. So, okay, it pretty much got disconnected.